Well, when Lori invited me to come speak about school, I thought that was great because I've spent almost my entire life in school trying to protect myself from reality. But it wasn't always that way. I grew up in Northern California working in a factory, and that job was very connected to reality. For example, a riveting machine. I don't know how many of you have ever been best friends with a riveting machine, but it's pretty exciting. You can rivet using your left foot or your right foot on the pedal, and then you can make little songs, do little dances like da 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 da. Then there are other games you can play, like predicting the exact minute at which the riveting machine will run out of rivets and need to be refilled. And if I could win that game, then I could treat myself to playing another song. So after a few million rivets and a lot of hours sweeping the floors and cleaning the shop bathroom, I decided I had had enough of reality and I would stay in school. So I thought of the place that was farthest from reality as I understood at the time, Los Angeles, and went to a small college full of students who were trying to come to grips with the reality that they hadn't been admitted to Stanford. And when they graduated, they went and did practical things like join the Peace Corps or start tech companies. But I stayed true to my principles and went to graduate school, which caused a little bit of friction at home. My dad had dropped out of college, and so he was pleased that I graduated from college. But the graduate thing, school thing, he didn't quite get. So he would say, so what exactly do you do in graduate school? And I would say, well, you spend 4 or 5 years writing a thesis that no one ever reads. Which he did not find entirely convincing. And he would say, so why don't you do something useful, like wiring homes or riveting? And since I didn't have a very good answer for that question, actually, I was pretty much disinherited for a few years. So I found a place that, according to my then understanding, was farthest removed from reality, Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I went to graduate school there and studied Zeno's paradox. Now, Zeno's paradox is the one where on the first day, you eat half of the ramen package. And then on the second day, you eat half of what's left. And on the third day, you eat half of what's left. And then you never run out. I called that Zeno's financial aid program. But like most brilliant philosophical concepts, I hungered for more. And so I ended up spending a lot of time at the house of the Hare Krishnas, who served a lot of free food that was better than ramen. And I actually got to know the guy who was in charge of it, and we had a lot of philosophical discussions that were more interesting in Zeno's paradox, like about his father's sex life, which was a little bit weird. After that, I went to the place which was even further, or did the thing that was even further from reality, which is I became a university professor, which led to more interesting discussions at home. And I remember trying to explain to my grandmother the publishing parish I did. And she would say, but Mark, I don't understand why you're still writing papers. I thought by now you would be grading the papers. So I became pretty much the black sheep of the family, the little kid who grew up and never did anything productive. And I went and became a university professor. And since the university is, as we know, basically the farthest place from reality, that's where I stayed. But that was not the only reason I stayed in school. I think my career in school was an unrelenting string of failure, and I was really trying to stick with it until I found something that I could do better than riveting. So going back to Northern California, things started badly in kindergarten when I was the last person in class who learned how to tie his shoes. And the teacher made sure I would remember my inadequacy by making me sit at a table with a little ceramic shoe, so that I would never forget it, and obviously that worked. The only thing I remember from elementary school was that unstructured recess was basically a riot with a bell. And so the kids would come out and scream and yell and deface school property and commit various felonies, and the girls would beat me up because the boys didn't think it was worth the trouble. And then finally, I would be saved by the bell. Oh, incidentally, given the citrus theme of a couple of previous stories, this is my weak attempt at continuity, so I hope you appreciate that. All right. Then in junior high school, I tried band, and I was so bad that the band instructor refused to let me go on the band trip. Then I tried chess, and I liked chess better because I could beat some kids. But then I ran into Carlos Ochoa. And playing Carlos was like this. I'd sit, think about my move for 3 minutes, and he'd think for 3 seconds, and I'd think for 3 minutes, and he'd think for 3 seconds, and I'd be gone in 20 moves. And he could play without a piece, with his eyes closed, listening to music. It didn't matter. I was gone in half an hour. So I don't know where Carlos Ochoa is now, but wherever he is, I'm sure he's glad that I gave up chess. Then when I went to high school, someone explained to me that social skills are important. So I tried to hone mine by going to Woody Allen movies. Not necessarily successful. Then I got a little bit more in touch with reality, and I joined something, got involved in something called the Environmental Education Project. And this is where a bunch of us went around to elementary schools and taught kids about stuff like pollution and recycling. We got our names in the paper and lots of little recognitions and stuff. Except as far as I could see, we had no value. For example, I helped to design a game on ecosystems. And we would bring this game into the classroom and explain it all and hand out all the parts. And then basically, it was just a riot and the kids threw the pieces around. So that was when I knew that I would never go into teaching. So we got honored for our ineffective activity by a couple of us getting to go to Sacramento and get an Environmental Awareness Award from the governor. Now, it did strike me somewhat ironic at the time getting an Environmental Awareness Award from Ronald Reagan, who became famous for saying that trees cause more pollution than cars. But it was still exciting to go and meet the governor until we met him. And he looked a lot different from how he looked on TV. He looked old, tired, kind of out of it. And I thought, it's a good thing this guy's political career is almost over. But later, I realized and came to appreciate that politics is the last refuge of people who have failed at everything else. And with that insight, I decided to run for the school board. I knew nothing about campaigning, nothing about running a school district. And I had a campaign manager who knew less than I did and had the moral compass of, well, basically the typical campaign manager. And he figured out that I was hopeless right away and disappeared until 3 days before the election. And he called and said, "Hey, Mark, how's it going?" And I said, "Hey, Pat, we're doing great, on the way to victory," which is what politicians always say. And of course, I got annihilated. That was my senior year of high school. And at our pathetic little election party, the network, TV network, local TV station called and wanted me to come down for an interview. And I said, "Why? I'm in last place." And the lady said, brightly, "But you're doing better than we expected." And I thought, okay, if you're in last place and doing better than you expected, then it's good to know that I will never run for office again. Then in college, the speech coach recruited me for Reader's Theater, which is sort of like a theatrical version of this event. And we were doing something by Kurt Vonnegut, and I had a 2-word part. I had to say, "Stop thief." Right? Well, after dozens of rehearsals and work in coaching, I was cut from the part. So that was when I knew it was good that no one would invite me to do anything like that again. And then finally, having failed at everything, I had to circle around and start doing things over again. I think the Hare Krishnas call that the circle of failure. You sort of go around through life failing at everything, and then when you're done with that, you start over. So I went back and became a teacher and loved the sort of demigod aspect of being able to face all these bright young students in the morning and fill their eager minds full of whatever nonsense I just thought of over breakfast. But of course, that's not what I mean. What I mean is fill them full of intellectual insight and philosophical constructions that help them to understand the world and become great voters and succeed. So then a couple years later, I run into one of my students clerking at Walgreens. And the student always says, Dr. Stegeman, I loved your course. I learned so much. And I say, wow, tell me what you learned. And there's this long pause. And he says, I like the part where you burn the money. Because I used to burn money to wake people up. Until a student told me that the Congress made it illegal to burn money, which is sort of ironic. And then I switched to throwing grapefruit. And you can see that that works. So, a couple years ago, I was in a bar, and I don't know, I'm probably abusing my time, but that's just typical. Let me tell this last story. So I was in a bar, and everything I've said is true, by the way. This is not embellished, sadly. So, and I ran into this woman who'd been a student of mine a couple years before, and I remembered her because she was really at the top of the class, and my class is about 400 students, so that's pretty good. And I thought, okay, this is the student who will prove my value as a professor. And she, of course, said, oh, Dr. Stegeman, I loved your course, I learned so much. I said, yes. So, what did you learn? And she stirred her mojito and thought very seriously. And then she looked straight at me and said, I love the part where you threw the grapefruit. So, thank you very much, and I know that sometime in a couple of months, I'll meet one of you, and you'll say, oh, that was such a great thing you did at Odyssey. And I'll say, wow, what part did you enjoy the most? And there'll be a long pause, and you'll say, the part where you threw the grapefruit. Thank you very much.